We have a major problem with how we ramp new account executives. Your new AEs are being declared ramped at 3 or 6 months, but can they actually run discovery or execute the sales process without you jumping in to save them? Most can't, and that's the problem. Most sales teams ramp reps based on time in seat and not capability-based onboarding where you certify your new sellers. So I built a playbook full of frameworks, implementation roadmaps, and infrastructure guides that cut ramp time in half and have proven to improve win rates by 75%, and it's completely free. So stop this episode right now and go and download the Sales Readiness Playbook at therevenueenabler.com or use the link in the description below. All right, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast. And today I'm joined by Chris, who's the VP of Global Sales at Attest. Hey Chris, how's it going?
Hey James, doing well. Thanks for having me.
No worries, looking forward to the chat. Chris, I was actually on your LinkedIn profile before we hopped on. What an interesting journey you've been on. It's not your classic SDR to AE manager to revenue leader. You started out working for the government, is that right?
I did. 1,000 years ago, but that was kind of where I started, yeah. And I decided I needed to get out of that. I was kind of in a marketing track, and after the 2010 general election, there was a freeze on all marketing expenditure.
Okay.
And I thought, well, this is probably not the place to be building the career that I want to build.
Yeah.
So I kind of moved into finance and then into management consulting, where I held various BD roles. And so that was the kind of transition into sales, really. But yeah, I found my way into the wonderful world of SaaS probably only about 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, and you're still there. So you're still there. It's cool. Your journey is really exciting. And it just shows that with the right mindset and plan and work ethic and student of the game mindset, you can go from marketing in a government organization to running global sales, right? Which
Exactly.
isn't the easiest job in the world. So yeah, looking forward to getting into the chat today. Today we're talking about scaling enterprise sales organizations, something that some organizations are thinking about, some of them are attempting to at the moment. So looking forward to getting your expertise and point of view on some things. I think it's good if we start maybe around like culture, because
Yes.
you want to find that healthy balance, right? Especially if you're thinking about scaling the enterprise globally. There's a couple of things that you want to get like foundations in place before you go and start building the house. So from your perspective, how do you find that balance when you're building these global orgs?
Yeah, I really love this question because I think, culture means so many different things to different people. I think particularly in the world of technology, right? A lot of people think of culture and they think of, well, it's free food in the office, or it's beanbags, or, if it's a bigger office, you've got a ball pit or something like that. And I don't think any of that is culture, right? Those are perks and they're welcome, but it's not culture. So when I think about culture, or the type of culture that I've always tried to build in my teams, it's usually a culture that kind of revolves around learning in some way. I always want my team to feel hungry and excited to come into work because they know they're going to be challenged and they know they're going to be pushed, but they're going to learn more than they've ever learned in any other point in their careers, right? And that spirit of continuous improvement, I think, is really exciting if you have the mindset and appetite for that. I actually credit a lot of that way of thinking to my first role in SaaS sales. I joined a company called Medallia, which, you and some of your listeners may be familiar with. It's a customer experience management platform. From a consumer perspective, people might be more familiar with it from, a survey that they might have received when they've shopped at an Apple store or something like that. But it was a very, very lucky place to start. Steve Walski, who was CEO of Parametric, and he was on our board, he used to talk about Medallia being the greatest sales team that no one's ever heard of. And they really had this big focus on learning and development. And, everything that I hold true today about discipline and rigor and qualification, it can all kind of trace its roots back to Medallia and that focus on learning and enablement. So I think it's something you have to take seriously. I think that it requires you to create the right foundation where people are supported and they feel safe to kind of experiment with things and try and fail. Um, and sometimes when I've talked about this in the past, I've talked about it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Just above the physiological needs of food and safety and shelter, there's security, right? People need to feel secure. So you need to kind of create that environment where people uh, feel empowered to kind of lean into risky things. So they do kind of learn and try and fail. Um, and I think as sales leaders, we have to kind of lead the way, right? It's important that we kind of go first and demonstrate that we're not asking the team to do anything that we're not prepared to do ourselves.
Hmm.
So I will generally, take the first pass at a new elevator pitch or new talk track when we're releasing a new feature or whatever it is, and I'll record it and share it with the team. And they can then use that as the foundation to kind of build their own version. But yeah, making sure that we're finding opportunities to uh, give people a platform to showcase the great work that they're doing, making meetings a learning moment rather than just a
Mm.
readout. Something I borrowed from your podcast, actually. We've created a Mastery Monday event
Oh,
uh,
lovely. That's great.
every Monday where instead of doing what we used to do, we still find times in the week for forecasting and deal reviews and all the rest of it. But every Monday now, the whole team event, the global event, is an enablement focus session. We pick a new sales skill and we drill it. We do role plays or we do workshops. And I think if you kind of get those fundamental building blocks in place, you've kind of got the foundations for a really good culture.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love it. I love Mastery Monday as well. It's such a cool concept. I was before we jumped on, I was talking about just come back from holiday for a couple of weeks in Spain, and um, I love my own space. So I'm out every morning, every evening, getting my steps in, and just disappearing in my head or listening to a good podcast. And because the game's always changing, I love to listen to revenue leaders and things like that. And do you know what's really funny, Chris? Whenever I listen to like a CRO or a really senior sales leader, and they talk about everything that you're talking about, they don't say, "Oh, hey, we put this tool in there and we put that tool in there, and we closed our eyes and crossed our fingers and things like that, and it happened." They all obsess over like you have to hire the right people that are intelligent, coachable, adaptable, gritty. All of the things that we know. They're self-aware students of the game, and then you just develop the hell out of them,
Yeah,
and then just get to know them, needs, wants, desires, insecurities, and then just get intimate with them and help them on their journey. And I think
that's exactly.
unfortunately, because a lot of people get promoted from rep to manager and they go through the same cycle of don't get any training or help at some of these companies, they they do the same thing that their boss did to them, which is just say, hey, more KPIs or more pressure, and we know how that ends out, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And I think it does connect to hiring, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a lot more detail, because um, I think a mistake that I've certainly made in my career is kind of looking for the wrong things when I'm hiring people. It's very tempting to think, oh, it's about the domain expertise or the black book. But actually what you want to find is people who have that hunger to kind of go
yeah,
deep and learn the domain, which might be unfamiliar to them, or the vertical that they're going to be selling into. I think typically those are the kind of salespeople I've had the most success with in my career.
yeah, and it sounds like you were, I don't want to say lucky, but you were in a fortunate position when you went into SaaS. You went to a company like you did who see it the same way as you do around how important it is. We're doing a program at the moment with 85 CSAEs and SDRs, and some of them, this is their very first job,
Hmm.
and some of them are like grads or like they're on like work experience almost, right?
Cool.
And like last week, I was in their office for 2 days doing one of the cohorts of a MEDDIC boot camp. And I said to them, I said, guys, you might not know this, but I'd feel really happy that my first organization I've worked for is spending the significant amount of money and time and effort on leveling me up and helping me build my career, knowing that I'm probably not going to end it here. And I
Yeah.
just think that's such a cool thing. And if more organizations saw it like you did, Chris, where it's like critical to develop your people and it's not so much about the tools and the spiffs this quarter and things like that. Like it's about making people great, showing them you care.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens around attracting other people and retaining those people and driving performance. We just
And
talk
it's
about scale.
so fulfilling as well, right? When you see these kind of new and growing and ramping sales talents that you've kind of nurtured, spreading their wings and going on to amazing things elsewhere. I mean, one of the best hires I think I ever made, a salesperson I hired into my team at Medallia, who went on to be a multi-year President's Club awardee and all the rest of it. A few years later, he moved to Anaplan. And last time I touched base with him, he was on about 600% of his quota, which maybe says something about the quota as well.
Yeah.
So
But
there
it's
is
still a good shift, right? Still a good effort being put in.
exactly, and it's really, really, really rewarding to see that, and
Yeah.
to feel you played a part in shaping that person's career.
Yeah, totally. And something you said there, like in disguise, is that you're still in touch. Like
Yeah,
my point of view when I stepped up into be a VP was like, this is going to go back in time, but the old classic Jeremy Kyle days when they used to like bring on somebody who like wasn't the best person, and they found out that actually his old man wasn't the best person to him, and his old man used to beat him, and like this ripple effect, right? So when I became a VP, I was like, I'm not going to do the same thing that happened to me when I was a rep. I'm just going to go the other way and just completely give them everything, in my time to develop them. And as a result, like I've still stayed in touch with pretty much all of especially the last team, and they've gone on to do great things. That's that you said it is satisfying to sit back and watch people grow. And if that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning, maybe that role isn't for you then, because for me that's what that role is pretty much all about. Obviously growth and everything, but that just comes from that stuff. Right,
very well said.
Naturally. You mentioned hiring earlier, something that is critical, I think, to the role that you're in and a lot of our listeners. When it comes to account executives, like what do you look for specifically, and is that maybe a little bit different today than it was maybe a few years ago based on how things are shifting?
Maybe. I mean, I think there are some things that I like to look for that I think are just good practice, right? I like to look for some evidence of promotion within, particularly now that I'm hiring for enterprise AEs. I like to find people who've taken the path that you described at the start of the call, from SDR, SMB, mid-market, and have started to cut their teeth on enterprise opportunities. I think that's good. And on the flip side, I still like to screen out candidates who have maybe jumped around a bit. The occasional 18-month stint is not disqualifying in itself, but if there's tons of that, it's a question mark, right? But I think really for me, it's a case of being really, really clear about the profile, and not treating that profile as a checklist, because you're not going to find someone who has all of it, right?
Yeah.
And if you try to find someone who does all 15 things, you're never going to hire anyone, and then you're going to panic a year down the line, and make the wrong call. So be really clear about your profile, but look for someone who's a good fit for the profile overall. For me, I think the non-negotiables are always motivation. I really want to understand why the company that I'm hiring for is the right company for them at that moment in their careers. Salespeople are often coin operated, and that's fine. I think it's good for them to be kind of money motivated, but I like it to be money plus. What do they want the money for, right? Is it about future, or is it an investment? There needs to be something which is going to keep you motivated and going when times are tough, which they will occasionally be in every quarter, right? Another non-negotiable for me is a recent history of self-sourcing their own pipeline, which, again, I'm sure we'll talk about later, because that's one of those things which is kind of subtly changing in the age of AI. And another one would be ability to handle complexity, very important in the enterprise space. These are complex deals. You need to know how to multi-thread. You need to know how to build relationships and prospect at different levels. You need to be able to drive complex procurement processes and all the back and forth with the redlining. So those for me are kind of fundamentals that I look for every time. And, if someone doesn't have that, I'll probably pass quite quickly and move on. A lot of other things I think are nice to haves, right? So we talked about domain knowledge and vertical knowledge being, helpful, but not necessarily disqualifying. Interesting, I found that sports, it sometimes correlation, if people have background in sports at, a semi-professional level, or if it's something they do seriously as an amateur, that often correlates with someone who has the kind of grit and determination to kind of push through, and the discipline.
100%.
So it's a kind of profile piece where I try to look for a good fit overall. When you do get it right, it really, really works, as you know. Getting the hiring right solves so much pain down the road. I think the thing that I've had to learn, where I've probably changed quite a lot over the years, is the flip side and performance management, and getting much more comfortable with making the difficult decisions early in the process.
Yes.
The classic trap is, oh, we can't take any remedial action with AEX, right? Because they're on the HSBC account and we need that to come in this quarter. But then, of course, it doesn't come in this quarter because you've got the wrong AE on it. And the right decision is always to act as early
Yeah.
as you can. And that's probably one of the areas where I've changed my kind of approach most dramatically. You don't want to be ruthless, you don't want to be unkind, but it is often the right decision to sooner. And generally, it's better for the AE if they're somewhere where it's just not working out. And the reality is, we all,
Yeah.
very early if it's the wrong bit.
Yeah.
So, kind of owning my hiring mistakes and taking, swift action is probably the area where I've had to do the most work over my career.
Yeah. 100%. And making sure that it's never a surprise.
Yes,
It
yes,
should never, that rep should never jump on a call with you and that be the exit should be the first time that they're aware of it.
100%.
And unfortunately, we speak to a lot of reps through our consumer offer as well, and they're like, "Oh, can you help me land a new role because I've just found out I'm being fired." And I was like, "What was the plan like running up to that?" Like, no. I just got an invite, and HR were on the corner. I was told I was let go. That's wild.
Yeah,
Um,
that's terrible. No,
yeah,
it needs to be documented. You need to give the relevant feedback. You need to support people through a
yeah,
PIP process as well, right?
yeah.
You don't want people to feel that it's sink or swim. Um, but yeah, you do need to kind of take that action and make those difficult decisions quickly.
Yeah, I think when it comes to scale, then you're probably pretty good at like setting the operating standards and saying, look, this is what good looks like in our organization. This is the line though, and we don't kind of cross this area, and just making sure that those standards are clear, especially if we're going to go like multi-region or whatever. Need to make sure that we're all aligned on how we do things here.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I found if there is no clear documentation on this kind of stuff, people don't really know what good or bad looks like in some areas, or they don't. They push a little bit too hard in one way and they don't realize where the line is. And then you've got to go and have a crap conversation when actually it can be avoided just by setting some operating standards and, the cultural values and things like that. Say, this is how we do things here. And ideally do that as soon as they join. So it's clear from day one or before they even start.
exactly right. And that's particularly important, I think, if you're making an operational shift, right? If you're maybe moving from being a mid-market sales team to an enterprise sales team or whatever it is, that will necessitate a different way of working. And that won't be everyone's speed.
Yeah.
There might be difficult conversations, but there might also be people who decide off their own bat, this isn't really for me, right?
Yeah.
And I think they need to know what you're moving towards, right? So I think that clarity and that transparency is vital.
Yeah, agree. And the recruitment thing is something we could probably spend an entire day talking about because of its importance. One thing you mentioned earlier is you look for people that have gone through several rounds of promotion.
Mm.
I think a big part of talent attraction or like acquiring really good people is we have to then show the market that we are also aligned to that. So one thing that I was a big fan of like is having micro promotions. So not having to wait exactly 12 months to get the promotion. It doesn't have to be time based, it can be performance based or behavior based and say, hey, if you hit quota for the next 2 quarters and maintain a rolling 35% win rate, will bump you to level 2, and that gives you a little bit of pay, maybe a little extra kick here and there, maybe some more equity, and then we can demonstrate out to the market, hey, we promote often and fast, and you're going to build a career here, not just sit in the seat for 2 years and have to fight every time you want a promotion or a pay rise. If you want to attract some people, you have to communicate that you do that stuff as well, right? So I think again, this is something that I was never taught. I learned the hard way of if you want to attract certain people, you need to talk the way that's going to attract those people. It's just like selling and prospecting, right?
Yeah, I absolutely love that because, the traditional thing to do would be to find ways to expand someone's role, right? Or maybe you give them some informal uh, mentorship opportunities where they can kind of coach some more junior team members or whatever it is. But that's not very visible to the broader market. So yeah, I love what you're describing there. That's
Yeah.
a very, very smart way of working.
You said coaching, so let's maybe shift gears. Otherwise, we'll spend the whole podcast talking about recruiting. Coaching. Talk to me
Hmm.
about coaching to you, like what's it look like in your organization? Maybe some things that some people maybe get wrong that might be listening that might go, maybe I should stop doing that and start doing it slightly differently. Does anything come to mind?
Well, I think coaching happens in lots of different ways, right? And I think um, there's structured enablement, which is really important. And I think as sales leaders, we have to own that and play a big role in the delivery of that. Um, so, for example, we deployed command of the message as our sales methodology at Attest last year, and we've had 6 monthly refreshes, and I lead all of those workshop sessions. It's really important, I think, that we have a kind of shared language, and that I'm able to kind of set the standard and demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about and all the rest of it, but with a kind of train the trainer lens, right? And it's really nice that over the past couple of cycles, the sales directors who line up into me and my peers and customer success have been partnering with me to deliver the training. So I think that's part of it and really, really important. But then I think you also coach through the systems that you put in place. Um, and in the context of a test, MEDDIC is quite a good example of that. We don't actually use MEDDIC. We use a kind of in-house version, but essentially it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
I presume everyone who's listening to this show will know what MEDDIC is, but if anyone doesn't, it's a qualification
Where have you
for
been?
where have you been,
Yeah.
right? So all of the letters stand to a qualifier that you use to kind of understand if you've asked the right questions to drive the deal forward. And when I first joined Attest, um, it was really a kind of checkbox exercise. It was a semi-automated widget that lived in our call recording software. And you'd get a check in the box if there were multiple stakeholders that you were speaking to, and it would say, right, you're multi-threading, thumbs up. And of course, if none of those people are the economic buyer or the decision maker or the champion or an influencer, then you're not multi-threading.
Yeah.
And if your champion isn't exhibiting champion behaviors, if they're not, sponsoring senior meetings for you, then they're not a champion, right? So if you just treat it as a checkbox, you're masking all of the richness that MEDDIC can actually support, right?
Hmm.
We've turned that on its head. We've run a lot of enablement around MEDDIC, making sure everyone understands what all of those qualifiers are in detail. Um, we've made it the central pillar of how we run deal reviews, and we built a weekly cadence around that. So the coaching is supported by the right engine, the right kind of system. And then I think the last piece, and this is probably the piece that people forget, because there's so much to do as sales leaders, and we've pulled in so many directions. I think people often forget the importance of leading from the front and
Hmm.
give all those shadowing opportunities. Um, and that was actually probably one of the highlights for me over the past 18 months at Attest. I'm a big believer in prep, and I think that's where all of the richness of MEDDIC and command of the message come together. And I want to make sure that my team are prepping the right way, particularly for the really important customer interactions or prospect interactions that are coming up. And that was a bit of a step change for my team, who were coming from very much a mid-market heritage, where it was more of a kind of rinse and repeat sales motion at the volume end of the business, where they didn't necessarily need to invest that kind of time in prep that I was really encouraging them to do. And I was partnering with one of my AEs on a cycle with a large pub chain, and I think he was getting quite frustrated with me throughout the process, and he didn't quite understand why I was drilling him so hard on the prep side. But then we had the meeting, and the feedback was phenomenal. And as we were debriefing afterwards, he said that was actually a kind of career highlight for me. And it wasn't just the feedback I got from the prospect; it was the knowledge that I had going into
Mm.
the meeting, that no matter what they threw at me, what objections I got, there were a dozen different directions I could take the conversation. And I've never felt that before in a meeting. And that's kind of changed how I'm going to prep from now on. And it really has, right? So for me, that is evidence of the value of rolling up your sleeves and getting stuck in. Um, and aside from anything else, it's just great fun. And I think it's easy to forget that that's a really important part of coaching as well. It doesn't just
Yeah.
happen once; it happens on the job. Um, so yeah, that's probably kind of where my head is at when it comes to coaching.
Yeah, spot on. I love the prep piece. I'm a big fan of it. We've got those little call plan templates that we give people. I
Yeah,
love the way of just winging it and wondering why sales wasn't happening. because I was just doing it like just off, random, not by design. But it is funny, like there's a couple of things that you can put in place, like a prep process, like how to prepare for a disco versus a demo versus a business case, economic buyer meeting. And if you kind of force the change in some of it, they feel uncomfortable at first because people maybe don't usually do them. But it's like sometimes before we kick off a program, we say, "Hey, walk us through your forecasting stage definitions," and they're like, "Oh, we don't have that." And I'm like, "What about the stage and exit criteria?" It's like, "Oh, we don't have that." I'm like, "Well, if we actually just put that in and then we just bug it off,
Mm.
that would actually solve a big part of your problem, because reps actually don't know when to not move a deal forward. What do they need to capture evidence around before they move a deal from stage 2 to 3, right? So,
Yeah.
like actually having like a process say, hey, if you just go through this process, it might feel uncomfortable at first, but like I'm telling you to do it because I spent my whole career doing it and I do it now.
Yeah.
You'll be amazed how much more confident you feel going into that conversation, which means you'll be seen more of a trusted advisor. You'll be able to deal with something in the moment rather than going away.
Yeah.
It's so important, right? And
It's
helping
important.
them come to that realization.
Yeah, exactly. And I try to sort of make it just really kind of logical and straightforward as well. So I mean, the flow that I find myself going through a lot at the moment with my team is, what are our objectives? And by that I mean, what do we want to achieve? What do we need to have planted in the minds of the stakeholders at the end of this meeting for this to be a successful meeting? And you kind of get your laundry list of things, and then you think, okay, great. Now, based on that, what is the delivery mechanism? How do we craft the right agenda so we are delivering on each of those objectives that we need to kind of achieve? And then you can think about, right, and who's going to deliver that message? And only then do you start creating content, I think. So it's that there's always a bit of a rush to kind of pull the deck together, I find. And
Yes.
that I think the motion that I often find myself getting into is kind of reverse engineering that and trying to get people to start with those objectives first.
Yeah, 100%. I'm desperate to get this on a t-shirt, Chris, but I basically have this like thing called Win the Day.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
one of the first things I built 2 years ago when I started this business was these daily planners, because there's never like any of these like cool old school tools anymore. It's all on Google Docs and stuff, but they're physical planners. And like on the left hand side, it's like, what are my pipeline goals for today? What do I need to do? Like, what are my non-negotiables? What are my pipeline advancement opportunities today? And then what did I learn? And
mm,
the winning the day is a thing that I came across years ago, which was like, it started out as personal, like how do I just get the best out of today, like with my health and my diet and everything like that, and my work and my relationship. And then it blended into the sales part. It's like, well, I know this is my sales process, these are the 5 stages or whatever, but what do I need to do today
yeah.
to advance the conversation with Chris from where we are through to him going away and advocating for me and putting me in contact with the economic buyer? Like, what do I forget everything else? Just really simplify it. And again, these are the things that we should be talking to our sellers around, is like, hey, forget this big thing like your quota and everything that's important.
Yeah.
What do you need to do today with this opportunity just to advance it one step further? How do you win today?
I love that. I love the idea of the daily planner as well. And there's something about it being a bit old school, right? There's something for me
Mm,
about writing things down and that hand to brain thing where, I find the agenda becomes much stickier if I've gone
yeah.
through that. But yeah.
Yeah. But also, like me, you go through my planners, right? Like they're literally just like there's random words. No one will make sense of it, but I do. And there's like some of them got little underlines or circles, and that's because I learned a long time ago that people are buyers are frustrated that they think salespeople don't listen and understand their world. So then
Yes.
they push back and like, maybe I won't put my name to that thing that might hurt my internal reputation. So I've
Mm,
always been really big on like hitting a replay and fully understanding. So like, hey Chris, like, I didn't want to interrupt you when you said something a minute ago because you were laying down some good stuff. But can we just go back to, and it's just a visual aid for me. If it's underlined or circled, it's there to hook me.
yeah.
These are just like little tools that you don't get in a Gong or a Salesforce or whatever, that they're old school and they cost you, I don't know, a couple of quid.
Yeah. And they really work.
They do really work.
Yeah.
So for our modern listeners, we'll move on because we'll send tactics. But you mentioned around the coaching piece. For me, it's so important. I at CNET, which was the last org that I built before I decided to do this, I went into that with a mindset of how do I retire myself.
Mm,
There was lots of big skill gaps, and they were selling to the world's biggest brands, the Amazons of this world. And my point of view on this was, how do I retire myself? Not almost say, hey, I'm going to like call it a day now and just play golf 5 days a week, but how do I get these people to a stage where they no longer need me?
Mm.
And that was like role play every day, every morning, without fail, regardless of where you sat in my org.
Mm.
AEs had to do role play in the afternoons, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on discovery or demo or business case or economic buyer meetings, depending on where I was seeing it bad in the data. And then call coaching one-to-one and deal reviews. Yeah, it was intense for me from a time perspective. But 11 months later, those guys were like up and to the right, and they were coming to the call reviews going, hey, so self-aware, because they were looking at it through the same lens as me by going, I know what you're going to say. I've also listened to the call with IBM. I did this, but I didn't then do this. I know exactly that's what you're going to say to. Just see what I mean? So they started to see it and they become more self-aware, where before they were like, I don't really get why it's not happening. It's not vibing right now. We got a great product. I don't know why people aren't buying it. And just like really helping people look at it through the lens that how you see things. But
Mm.
if you tell them, if you give them all the answers to the homework, it doesn't really go in. They have to think critically about this stuff. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, oh, Chris will come in and save the day when it gets to stage 4. I'll just get it to stage 4.
Yeah, I love that. It's definitely about, it's a very similar skill that you'd use in a prospect meeting, right? It's about asking the right questions to
Yeah.
get them to make the connections for themselves. I used to have a sales leader who, would sometimes ask me in coaching sessions, maybe they'd throw out some idea and I'd say, well, I don't know. And his follow-up would be something like, well, what would you say if you did know? Right. And there's something around really encouraging people to do the deep thinking.
Yeah.
Uh, so they do see it your way. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, 100%. Let's keep moving on with like the coaching piece. So let's say you do have a deal that's kind of late in the stage
Mm.
and there's like a discount request coming up and a negotiation. How do you feel about like discount levers and reps agreeing to a discount? What's your kind of
Yeah.
point of view and take on this?
So, I mean, I don't love discounting. I mean, no one does, right? But I think it has its place.
Hmm.
Um, but generally, if you need to hit a certain price point to avoid triggering a particularly long procurement cycle, I think there are other ways of doing that. You can maybe descope the program a little bit rather than just cutting the price. I really don't like discounting when it's a sort of time bound uh, incentive, right, to bring the deal in quarter. Um, A, because it very rarely works, right? And B, just philosophically, I get what the AE is trying to do. They're trying to create a compelling event because they haven't been able to create one within the context of the deal. But it's just a sales trick. It's not a compelling event. It's a non-compelling event, if anything. These are
Yeah.
sophisticated buyers. They know that you'll still give them the discount the next month, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of think constructing really good deals starts before you even get to the negotiation. There was a really good example recently at Attest where we signed a deal with a major pan-European bank. Really good deal, 6-figure deal, 3-year contract, and getting that 3-year contract started with earning the right to be seen as a strategic partner. So we had to do everything else right? We had to translate the RFP requirements into what mattered to the broader business. We had to work really hard to connect our vision and our product to the bank's strategy. We worked with our champions over weeks and months to craft the right narrative for senior stakeholders. And all of that justified a long-term partnership. And then when we got into the negotiation, we had done our homework to really understand what mattered to them, which was basically the right price point for the initial launch, the land part of the land and expand motion,
Hmm.
and then baking in some economies of scale because there's the potential for the program to get very, very large at scale. And that meant that we actually had a lot of levers that we could activate without touching what really mattered to us, which was the 3-year term. Um, and we were able to produce different versions of the proposal. One, if we can have a case study, it's a bit more attractive. If we can't, and so on. But that meant that we were able to protect our margin while finding the win-win for us and the prospect. So I think that's kind of the approach, right? It's doing the work up front, which is in how you show up and how consultative you are. But then if you really work to understand their levers and what matters, then I think you can construct the right kind of win-win deals without saying, hey, I'll give you this price for 1 year, but this price for 2 years, which I think is a much less compelling way of working, really. So that would kind of be the way I would tend to coach my team.
Yeah, I love that. And this sometimes gets me into trouble, but it's just my point of view. But procurement's primary job is to buy in an effective way, but to buy for the
Yeah.
for the organization. their job isn't, hey, we're just going to hire you to hack down all these vendors. We want you to help us buy in an effective way. The second part of their job is to try and get a good deal. But if they can't, they are instructed by the economic buyer to procure technology services, whatever it is. And I think sometimes reps just cave so fast because they're desperate for the deal, or they think procurement, will not move forward without it. There's been so many times. I mean, it's easier when you've got deals around you to
Yeah.
pull this off. But by saying, I literally did it in London last week on a call. It's like, dude, like I can't do it. Like it wouldn't make any sense. I mean, it's a bit easier for me now because I said to him also, if I did do the discount, would you want me to do negotiation training with your team? So it's a little bit easier now. But back in the day, we were just firm and fair. We said, look, we believe actually this thing is underpriced. We're going to deliver these outcomes based on the multi-threaded discovery that we've done with your organization, and the business case talks to that.
Yeah.
I think we should focus our conversation more on how quickly can we realize this value that's on the business case versus try and save 5% here and there. But like you said, you have to go back to that early stage and actually uncover the value that the enterprise is trying to generate, and then document it and then socialize it.
Yeah, and don't forget to sort of stay in discovery mode with procurement, right? And understand, what the gives are that would be meaningful to them, so you can kind of find the right way of constructing things. I completely agree. I think the race to the bottom in terms of discounting in the long term doesn't do anyone any good. At scale, all it does is really devalue the domain, right?
Yeah.
You might have a product which is actually, occupying quite a lot of headspace among execs and the board. If you're giving it away for pennies on the dollar, it suddenly doesn't seem like such a valuable proposition. So I think it is important to defend pricing. There will be occasions when discounting is the right answer, but I think deal construction is the better way to think about it.
100%. I'm okay with a rep doing a controlled discount as long as we get something back if we have really strong cost justification.
Yes.
If we're doing a discount because we've not taken the time to justify our costs through proper value assessment conversations and calculating projections with the cost of action, stuff that's basic to a lot of us, right? But stuff that a lot of people do miss, then I think you should decline it and say you need to go back and you need to have discovery with your customer. You're actually not ready to have this conversation with your buyer right now. And again, that's just it comes back to the exit criteria and the gates, and it's clear that those organizations maybe don't have some of those in place, because if we can't quantify the value and justify our cost, we probably shouldn't be at the stage where we're with procurement having a discounting conversation.
Yeah, I'm
sometimes.
Yeah, 100%.
All comes back to value capture and articulation. Talk to me about prospecting. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and it's a bit funny out there at the moment. Some orgs are absolutely nailing it because they're leaning into the right ways, and some are still really struggling. What are you seeing out there in July of 2026 as we record this from a prospecting?
July of 2026, yes. I mean, the sort of word on the street in July 2026 is that outbound prospecting is dead.
Dead, yeah.
But, and I kind of get the argument, right? You've got AI prospecting tools, which can just handle so much more volume than humans can. So why bother? And an upshot, I guess, of how much AI prospecting there is out there is that it's really hard for humans to cut through, even when they do it, right? 10 years ago at Attest, I hear that SDRs were targeted on 20 sales qualified leads every month. Now 5 to 8 is kind of pushing it sometimes, right? So it is really, really hard. In spite of all that, I still think it's absolutely essential for a few reasons, actually. I think, first of all, prospecting is just a fundamental sales skill. And like any sales skill, you need to practice it. You need to hone it. What happens when an AE gets stuck in a deal? They need to know how they're going to prospect into another business unit or into a more senior stakeholder. And if prospecting is just something you did 10 years ago when you were an SDR, you're going to be rusty. Again, I used to have a sales leader who'd say, getting someone else to do your prospecting, it's like asking someone to go to the gym for you. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
But also, I think AE-led prospecting in particular really, really works. When we look at the data that we have at Attest, it is our top performing channel, jointly with our website. So in other words, that's kind of curious, right? When a prospect comes to our website and they click book a demo because they know that they have a problem that they need us to solve, AE self-sourced opportunities convert at the same rate. I think
Yeah.
that's extraordinary, right? And I think that's because AEs in particular are actually really well placed to cut through the noise of AI prospecting. I'm sure you probably talked about this on your podcast before, but when Apple introduced their call screening last year, where there was a voice assistant screening out, unknown numbers, everyone really panicked about that. But I genuinely
Mm.
think it's a great opportunity, right? Because
Yeah,
if
same.
you show up with an intelligent solution hypothesis and you articulate value with specificity and clarity, you're going to rise to the top. That is how you cut through the noise of less sophisticated prospecting. So I kind of think outbound is more important than ever, particularly in the enterprise space, which again is where I'm focused these days, because these are in-demand accounts. They're hard to reach contacts. Unless you have really strong brand recognition, they're probably not coming to you on the inbound. So I think the goal should be that AEs invest in pipeline generation to the extent that they feel confident they can hit their number off the back of pipeline that they self-source, and anything else is a bonus. In reality, I don't think that plays out that way in many organizations, but I think that should be the goal. That should be the sort of North Star that you set. So you're driving the right kind of behaviors.
Yeah, I love that. I think actually prospecting is with the right mindset and the right human being. And you went back earlier in your recruitment thing about grit. If
Yeah.
you've got someone that is prepared they're coachable, but they can also adapt. They're self-aware and curious, but they're gritty. They know it's just like it's out there. We
Yeah.
know there's people coming to our website raising their hand. There's got to be people out there that are going through pain that maybe don't know we exist.
Yeah.
So just got to keep telling the value story. I actually think it's quite easy to stand out now if you can be asked to spend a few minutes and actually think critically about, like you said, building out an account hypothesis, then looking at the buying center, or this could be a potential champion based on these experiences we've had with their peers.
Yeah.
This was the value story that we told. These were the financial outcomes we were able to generate. If you think about champions, and we're big on MEDDIC. I actually wrote a book last year called The Champion Playbook, because I think they are the ticket for us to win the deal.
Yeah.
If you think about and we have this paid framework, they have to have access to power, they have to be advocating for us, they have to be influential, but the D is so important. They have to have drive, they have to have a selfish, it has to be selfish vested interest in our success, because in enterprises, there's not this CFO sat in this office and a conveyor belt of DocuSigns coming across, and they're just going, someone's got to pick it up when we're not around and drive consensus and walk the corridors and stick their head into ops and finance and legal and all these different teams and rally the troops where he's got different competing initiatives and enemies and all of this kind of stuff. So I think it's so important that if you've got a rep that is curious, gritty, some of the attributes and characteristics that you mentioned earlier, and you give them the right guidance and coaching, I actually think it's quite easy to stand out now, but you have to put in the time.
You have to put in the time, and that's always the challenge, right? We've tried to put a bit of a structure around this at Attest to make it easy, and this isn't my idea. I always try to steal from the best. So we've initiated something that we call PG Tuesdays, Pipeline Generation Tuesdays, which is an entire dedicated to nothing but pipeline generation. Because, stuff will always get in the way. There will always be a reason to take this meeting or that meeting or build that deck. We've said no, nothing takes priority over PG on Tuesdays unless it's like a super late stage opportunity. Otherwise, we want everyone at their desk focusing on pipeline generating activities all day. And you find that it actually happens because, people don't have those interruptions. But the most amazing thing is that it actually kind of becomes fun, right?
Yeah.
You sit together and you hear each other's calls and you can hear people crashing out, but you hear the amazing kind of talk tracks as well. And you're able to say, oh, that was really good. Can you repeat that? I'm going to write it down and use it next time. So it takes this thing that is a grind. And again, it makes it this kind of learning moment for the team. And I can't speak for the team. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but for me, Tuesdays are a highlight in my calendar anyway.
Yeah. I've always said capability builds confidence, confidence builds pipeline, pipeline builds revenue. The reason that people hate cold calling is because they don't have the capability to do it. The reason buyers hate cold calls is they're sick of crap ones. I've never had someone at the end of a cold call where I booked a meeting and go, that was really crap, but I'll still take the meeting. I
Yeah,
can imagine anyone listening to this, or like any VP of HR, CFO, whatever it is, doesn't mind getting a cold call if it's well researched, really relevant, and solves a problem that they're headbutting the wall over.
that's it. That's
It's the
exactly.
ones that are naff, and
Yeah,
that's the problem today. Is AI will replace the cookie cutter generic stuff. It's really easy for it to copy that.
yeah,
So
completely.
you got to stand out. You got to do the work. It was all right all those years ago. I remember back in 2017 when I was an AE, and like SalesLoft and Vidyard and Outreach and stuff and Lead IQ were brand new in the UK. And I remember sequencing 300 CMOs at Adobe and Salesforce and booking meetings with them all. It's walk in the park. It's very different now.
Yeah,
And it was copy, paste, send, copy, paste, send, right? Netflix was on the other monitor and I was just like on autopilot. It's
yeah.
not like that anymore,
It's not. No, the landscape today definitely
unfortunately.
needs specificity, right, and relevance, and people have just got to do the work. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Um, I know there's a couple other questions we wanted to get into, but I'd love to get your perspective on this as we wrap. So we mentioned AI. How do you feel AI will evolve and change the role of the AE over the next 1, 2, 3 years?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think, I mean, it's already changed so much just over the course of the past year. I mean, it's changing every month at the moment. I would say that now, where I think most organizations are, is kind of in the space of AI assisted selling, right? So
Mm,
AEs who are using tools to reduce the time that they used to spend doing account research or prospecting or drafting emails. And uh, I think a lot of organizations, Attest is one of them, have invested in tools where AI is now helping us with Salesforce hygiene, and it's helping sales leaders with forecasting and deal qualification and things like that. And a few organizations are further ahead, but that's sort of where I feel most sales teams are now in July 2026. Um, but I think very quickly we're moving towards the next horizon already, where we're going to see agents doing a lot more of the prospecting, and it will get a lot better than it is now. Um, and beyond that, I think we're probably looking at networks of agents running the full cycle, right? Um, and including things like maybe experimenting with pricing and experimenting with new ICPs. I think that will happen well within the 3 year horizon that we're talking about here, right? So I think the future is probably smaller sales teams, um, where the individual AEs are running the more complex opportunities
yeah.
and stepping in for those more complex interactions. And the AE career will become more about handling that complexity and managing those higher value deals. Um, I think there's some work to do to get AEs ready for that shift. I mean, right now, I'm still seeing that there's work to do to get AEs to apply their judgment to AI outputs, right? Rather than just
Yeah.
send a deck that Claude has created across to a customer, really challenging it and putting it back into Claude and saying, no, rip this apart, test it against the RFP
Hmm.
criteria. I think there's more work to do to get people to understand how to use the tooling in the right way. Um, so there's some way to go to build the readiness that we need in our discipline of sales, right? But the technology is moving very, very fast, and I think we need to start preparing ourselves for that fully agentic future, which is just right around the corner, really.
I think it's exciting as well. I don't feel like there's ever been a more exciting time to be in sales and in business with the right mindset. And it not like, oh, I can put my feet up now and just go to President's Club. Like,
Yes.
use it as an enabler to help me improve
Yeah.
the quality of my execution, not just the quantity. We're just seeing people just do the same stuff that didn't work, just
Yeah.
faster and more of it, and then blaming AI,
Yeah.
without looking in the mirror and go, well, maybe I'm the problem. You know,
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, in the case of that pan-European bank we're talking about, we used a lot of AI in the creation of the proposal and the RFP response and all the rest of it. I don't think it actually saved us that much time, really, in the end.
yeah,
It took what was a 36-page deck and helped us kind of hone it to a 60-page deck or whatever it was, um, by kind of doing what I described, ripping it apart and really testing it against the criteria. And that took time and it took thought, but it meant that the quality was much, much higher. So I agree. I think we've leaned into the efficiency and the productivity. I think we now need to learn how to make our output better, which I think is the next hurdle. and then readying the team for a very exciting but very uncertain future.
Yeah, 100%. And like the vibe coding thing is evident that it is going that way. Boring but quick story, just to kind of maybe add some meat on the bone to what you said about it is going that way. Like Vidyard, whatever they're worth, millions and millions and millions, and then digital sales rooms is obviously exploding. Because I'm quite techie and curious, I vibe coded Vidyard in about 7 or 8 minutes while making a coffee, and then a digital sales room kind of app. And in February, I was at the zoo just out in Kent, with the boy and my partner for a couple of days, and closed a 42k and a 30k deal. Only like small orgs, training deals, but using a video that I created in this vibe coded app, and then hosted it in the digital sales room with the business case and the cost justification. Which then I got an email and a Slack notification to say that this person has viewed and looked at this and that kind of stuff. So if we're able to do stuff which requires huge engineering teams and lots of VC money to build, I'm pretty confident there's going to be an agent one day that can tell that terrible cold call or email that can do it completely for the SDR or the AE, right?
Yeah.
The bit that's missing, I think, in a lot of teams that I'm seeing anyway, Chris, is lack of context.
Yes.
So if we give it the context, and then we give it the task, it's actually really good at executing at that point. The people that don't think AI is very good is they have no context, and they're like, hey, write me a 2,000 word blog on sales forecasting. Go, that's crap. No shit. What's it looking at? Right?
Yeah, I think you're so right. It all comes down to the context. We did an AI challenge within our team recently. This is again part of the learning initiative. We want to experiment and fail fast and all the rest of it. And one of our team who, has self-diagnosed that they're less confident with cold calling than they'd like to be, they built a co-pilot in Claude to help them. And by giving it the right kind of context, they are just asking better discovery questions, getting to level 2, level 3 pain. And they booked meetings off the back of this. We only launched it this week and they've already booked 2 meetings. So I think you're exactly right there. I mean, context is everything. And when people invest the time to kind of learn how to use the tools in the right way, you get the results.
Yeah, learn is the key word. I can't remember who it was, did a post on LinkedIn about AI, and I was like, "We're going through the same cycle, dude. We gave everybody SalesLoft and Zoom Info. We gave them no training on how to use it effectively, other than you click this button to sequence, and no one built any pipeline. Now we're giving everybody AI because there's a big initiative from the board, but we're just saying, hey, Chris, we've just activated your Claude account." And you go, okay, sweet, I'll go activate it. And then you just go and start prompting it stuff with no idea, because none of us have ever done this stuff before, right?
Yeah.
It's wild, and we're going to go through the same cycle, and then maybe one day something cool will be created that's better than AI. I don't know what that would be, but we'll go and do that. So yeah, I think you nailed it. Context, and then like educating our people on how to get the most value from these tools so they can improve productivity, and then we can scale enterprise teams, which is the whole point of our conversation today. So
that's it.
Epic. We'll pause there because we'll probably end up getting lost for hours, and it's coming up to 5, and you've probably got a million things to do as the busy man that you are. But that was epic. I highly recommend going and following Chris on LinkedIn. I don't know if you're recruiting or hiring at the moment, but if anyone's listening to this, you can probably get a sense that Chris genuinely gets it, understands it, and cares about developing his people. So I'd follow him so that when he is recruiting, you can put your name forward. But is there anything you want to kind of say to the listeners, maybe, that if you are recruiting, or anything about the business that you guys are building?
We are hiring. We've got an AE role open in the UK and in the US as well. So yeah, please do get in touch if any of the topics that we've talked about today have resonated. And yeah, just thank you so much for having me, James. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been great fun.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And if you are looking for that AE role, remember, it's not just about the beanbags and the ping pong and the free coffee in the morning. It's about becoming an elite seller. And Chris is going to help you do that, and so will his team. So cool. All right, Chris, thank you so much for hanging out. Really appreciate it. And to everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast soon. All right, thanks for listening to this episode. I've got something else I want to give you before we wrap up here. So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistants. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills, and it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to therevenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions.